today's episode, we are predicting with 100 million bajillion percent guaranteed accuracy everything that will happen in the 2024 NFL season. We're going to start it off with 7 predictions that relate to fantasy football and statistics in particular. Then we're going to take a look back at last year's predictions because I made the same exact video last year, see what I hit, see what I missed. And at the end of the video, we're going to go through some football predictions. We're going to predict our Super Bowl winner, our MVP, and some other award winners. All right? Y'all know what to do. Bold prediction number 1. I'll tell you what that is not. Travis Kelce going lower than 0.5 receiving yards on Thursday Night Football. Week 1, the very first game of the season, and Underdog Fantasy is already hooking you up with a free square on the platform, okay? So if you're new to Underdog Fantasy, they have a free winner on there for you, all right? Download the Underdog Fantasy app. Use promo code BDGE if it is your first time on the app, and they're going to hit you with a big fat deposit bonus plus the free square, all right? Travis Kelce, half a receiving yard in Week 1. First real bold prediction here is that Breece Hall, the New York Jets running back, is the number 1 overall fantasy scorer in 2024. I just can't stop thinking about Aaron Rodgers and Devonta Adams and Aaron Jones and what they did in Green Bay and how that's just going to be Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall in New York this year, except whoever was sharing touches with Aaron Jones in Green Bay, whether it was Dylan or Jamal Williams, is just not there, and it's all going to be Breece Hall. I mean, Breece Hall was legitimately the RB2 in fantasy last year, despite being like 8 months removed from an ACL tear, and he had just 5 rushing touchdowns. I am pretty confident that after listening to as much inside Jets camp content as I could possibly get these mitts on, that this offense is securely running through Breece Hall, not through Aaron Rodgers. And the biggest selling point to me is that this offensive line should be massively, massively upgraded. So they bring in Tyron Smith, who is older, of course, but he is the 5th highest graded tackle last year in the NFL. They bring in 2 guys from Baltimore in Morgan Moses and John Simpson. Okay, so they take the Baltimore offensive line. Morgan Moses, who is also older, but was a top 15 graded tackle as well. And you have Simpson to shore up the interior. They use their first-round pick on Olu Fashanu, so that gives them both depth and flexibility at the tackle position behind those older dudes. So it relieves a little bit of pressure for them. You have Joe Tippmann last year, was a second-round rookie, and he's a center, and he was really good as a rookie. And I think coming into the second year, he's going to play much better and possibly break out everywhere playing in front of Aaron Rodgers. And then you have Elijah Vera Tucker, who was obviously an ascending interior offensive lineman towards Achilles last year, but he is back at training camp. He has been back in full practicing since the end of July. So he is all systems go. This is it's the Jets, so anything could happen. They've been super unlucky with health. Their offensive line always gets hurt and always just becomes ravished. But if they can stay healthy, given the talent and given the depth, this is a different offensive line that they've had in years with the number of like difference makers they have. This has a chance to be a special group up front. And there's really nothing in this division that scares me in terms of defenses that they have to play. Like New England, they were scary in the front 7. Judon's gone. Christian Barmore's gone. So it's like you got the Patriots, who's, they're going to be a good defense, probably a better pass defense. Their front 7 is not really that scary with Matt Judon gone and Christian Barmore hurt. You got the Bills, who have a completely turned over defense. You have Miami, who is going to be without Christian Wilkins, who's probably going to be without Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb for a portion of the year. Like, this is not a scary defensive division whatsoever. So Breece Hall is going to the absolute fucking moon, as is Terry McLaurin, because he's number 2 on this list. My second bold prediction is that Terry McLaurin is this year's DJ Moore. And I've said this already this offseason. About a month ago, I kind of claimed this. Last year, I predicted that DJ Moore was going to be the 2023 version of 2022 Amari Cooper. Now, DJ Moore ended up being the wide receiver 6 last year on pretty much the exact same target numbers that Terry just had last year. So DJ Moore saw 136 targets in 2023. Terry McLaurin saw 138 targets in 2023. Difference was DJ Moore caught 96 passes for 1,364 yards. Terry McLaurin gets a new quarterback in Jaden Daniels. The number 2 overall pick comes from LSU, has extremely accurate deep ball down the field. And when I look at the Washington receiving group, Terry McLaurin led Washington in targets last year, okay? The next 4 leading target getters that were on this team last year are all gone. Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, Logan Thomas, Antonio Gibson. That's like 320 targets up for grabs right now in that offense. And the way I look at it now is like Cliff Kingsbury's the OC. That offense is going to be a very quick hitting type of offense for the most part, and it's going to be that horizontal rate offense. So think of like Michael Pittman with him catching over 100 passes last year, a ton of them around the line of scrimmage. That's going to be like all Terry McLaurin. But that's kind of what DJ Moore was last year with Justin Fields, where a ton of his catches were around the line of scrimmage, like screen passes or deep shots down the field. I could see Terry being used very similarly to the way that DJ Moore was last year. So everybody's kind of counting Terry out. They're saying he's boring. He can't really hit a ceiling, et cetera, et cetera. Not so fast, okay? Terry McLaurin this year is DJ Moore. Bold prediction number 3. Rashee Rice catches over 100 passes this year. Rashee Rice so far in his limited time during the preseason has garnered a 38% target share with Patrick Mahomes on the field. Last year, from weeks 8 through 18, which is a 9-game sample size, he caught 53 passes. If you pace that out over 17 games, that is exactly 100 receptions, and that is while counting the fact that he played on fewer than 70% of snaps in 5 of those 9 games. So you look at the sample size over the second half of last year, and you say, okay, he was like quite literally on pace to catch 100 passes while not being a full-time player. He will undoubtedly be a full-time player coming into this year. He is a slot player, okay? His ADOT last year, his average depth of target was 5.2. That was literally the lowest mark in the NFL among any wide receiver with more than 15 targets. He was the baseline for just dump-off passes. Those are just easy catches all day. So I'm not saying his 100 receptions is going to lead to 1,700 yards. No. You got an 8 out of 5. That's fine. You are eating up PPR chunks in your fantasy lineup, okay? And when I look at this KC offense, I think with Hollywood and Xavier Worthy spreading out defenses, like he's going to be sitting open over the middle of the field all day long. And I put this little chart together. I got a little cute. I got into my Excel bag. This is the Kansas City offensive passing rates. If you just look from 2018 to 2022, these are all the years under Patrick Mahomes, obviously as a starting quarterback. They are consistently around 61.5 up to 63% in terms of just general passing rate as an offense. Last year, they could not do what they wanted to do. Their passing game did not work, and it sunk to the lowest it's been since Patrick Mahomes has taken over by over a full percentage point. Okay, so I expect that to spike back up to like 62%. I think there's going to be more volume than last year. I think they've gotten rid of some targets. They brought some in, obviously, but this offense is going to run through Rashee Rice in the air, and a lot of it's just going to be designed, open, schemed, beautiful shots to Rashee Rice. So Rashee Rice going over 100 catches in 2024. I want to talk about another receiver that's going to have an explosion 2024. That's A.J. Brown. I think he finishes as the number 1 overall wide receiver in 2024, okay? And if you look at, we all talk about how CeeDee Lamb finished. Do you remember how A.J. Brown started? Over the first half of last year, in the first 8 games, he was averaging 7.5 catches, over 10 targets, 117 receiving yards per game, and 0.62 touchdowns per game. On the right side, if you look at that middle row, the in split, right, it shows you the per game numbers, but right on the right side of it, it shows you what that paces out to over a full 17 games. With those numbers, you are looking at 128 receptions and 1,995 receiving yards, okay? And where I think this differs coming into this year as opposed to the second half of last year, Jalen Hurts got hurt, okay? And that made defenses play differently against him. They couldn't take shots downfield. They didn't have to play the run against him because Jalen Hurts was hurt, right? Hurt his ankle. He couldn't run. He was not mobile anymore. Therefore, you don't have to play anyone up in the box to account for him. You could play cover 2, deep safeties, back, all right? That is A.J. Brown City back there, all right? So when you don't have to worry about Jalen Hurts running, you can only sit back and worry about A.J. Brown going Yahtzee. So Jalen Hurts coming in and being fully healthy, with Kellen Moore coming in and being a fast-paced offense, and the fact that they get to play Washington twice a year, New York twice a year, those are 2 of the, if not the single worst secondaries in the NFL. Overall, they have a phenomenal schedule this year. They have to play like Cleveland and Baltimore, and other than that, Dallas is like the only other real defense that they have to play that make it like a tough defensive passing schedule. Okay, so love the schedule. Love what I think is going to happen this year with a healthy Jalen Hurts again, how defenses are going to have to play them. And they'll also have to account for Saquon Barkley being in the backfield. So like A.J. Brown, I think he could be, we'll get to the awards part of this at the end of this section, but A.J. Brown I think is in for a monster year. And I think we look at A.J. Brown as like a tier below all the great wide receivers. He is bigger, he is faster, and he is just as good of a separator as every fantasy wide receiver that's drafted above him. So look for A.J. Brown to fucking explode this year, and we should look for Trey McBride to explode this year, all right? So my bold prediction number 5, which you've probably heard 100 times this summer already, and he is ranked number 1 in my rankings. That is the bold prediction, that he will be the overall tight end 1 in fantasy football this year, where I guess it's not like super spicy, obviously, but it's just what I believe. I wanted to make a list of predictions that I thought were a little bit bold, but also me not just saying shit for the sake of saying shit. He is my number 1 ranked tight end this year in fantasy football. What you see over the second half of last year, he had a 31.8% first read share, which was the highest among any tight end in the NFL by a long shot. What he did over the second half of last year, averaging 14.9 PPR fantasy points per game, was better than Travis Kelce, who was the tight end 1 last year, averaging 14.8 PPR fantasy points per game. While they bring in Marvin Harrison Jr., they still have a shit ton of vacated targets in that offense. Vacated targets, vacated air yards, vacated red zone targets. With Kyler Murray fully healthy and the chemistry that those two showed last year, I'm in love with Trey McBride. All right. I don't care who hears it. I don't care who hears me screaming it from the fucking rooftop. Trey McBride, tight end 1 season. Number 6, none of the following 3 veteran quarterbacks will be the starter at the finish of their team's seasons. Daniel Jones, Russell Wilson, and Derek Carr. So with Russell Wilson, the obvious angle here is that Justin Fields is right on his heels, right? They just announced who is going to be the starting quarterback. He'll be on a very short leash. And I think if they just feel like as an offense, they need to spice it up or show a little bit more explosion, that's when Justin Fields comes into the mix. They also are, you're playing with Arthur Smith here. So Arthur Smith is the OC. We just saw him in Atlanta, made about 5 QB swaps over the last couple of years in Atlanta between Ritter and Mariota and Heineke. So like he is prone to doing so if he doesn't like the way that the offense is running, and that could absolutely happen with Russ. With Daniel Jones, this is actually way more contract related. I don't think there's a world where like anyone wants Drew Lock on the field over Daniel Jones, or Drew Lock gives the team a better chance to win than Daniel Jones does. But Daniel Jones' contract is set up in a weird way where if he is injured, there's a date in the offseason. I forget what the exact date is, March something or May something, that if Daniel Jones is injured during that time, his contract becomes like fully guaranteed, and it's a shitload of money against the cap. So there could be something with like, you remember when Russell Wilson was sat at the end of his tenure there in Denver? They sat him so that he didn't get hurt. That could also happen with Daniel Jones, because if he ends up, tearing his ACL again in November or December, they owe him a lot of money for being hurt. So just contractually, if this team is out of the running, if they're fucking 4-9 and they want to bench him for the last month of the season, I think that will absolutely be the case here. And Derek Carr, man, I think his offense is going to struggle. I think his offensive line is going to be really, really bad. I think Spencer Rattler, Chance are going to fucking fill up New Orleans by week 8, and I think he gets on the field. I think they just need that gunslinging mentality down there in NOLA, all right? So Spencer Rattler gets on the field. And my last and final 7th prediction for the year is Denver running back Jaleel McLaughlin outscores every single rookie running back in PPR. I know he's not a rookie, but I'm just saying I needed to give this away to spice it up rather than being like, he's going to be a top 15 PPR running back, whatever. That's Jonathan Brooks. It's Blake Corum. That's Trey Benson. That's Jalen Wright. That's Ray Davis. That's Bucky Irvin. That's Braylon Allen. Samaje Perine's out the door. The targets to running backs go crazy in a Sean Payton-led offense. He's going to play the Darren Sproles role. Darren Sproles went crazy when he was under Sean Payton in New Orleans, all right? And Denver's not going to have a good defense. I don't know if anyone knows this. I think people just think of Denver as a good defense, but this year in particularly, they have Patrick Surtain and they have a bunch of shit on that side of the ball. They lose their safeties. Their safeties are bad. Like every part of their defense for the most part is bad outside of Patrick Surtain and maybe like one other plus player. But they're going to have to pass the ball a lot to stay in games. And I think it's just going to go through their running backs. And they target their running backs at such a high rate in a Sean Payton-led offense. So I think Jaleel McLaughlin is a phenomenal PPR pick, and he's going below guys like Jonathan Brooks, Blake Corum, Trey Benson, and some of these other guys scattered throughout in a lot of drafts. But I really like him. I wanted to somehow work Javonte into a prediction this year, but you know what? I sided with Jaleel. That's where we're going. That's what we're doing. Let's go into my predictions for the year, and then we'll look back at last year. So we could timestamp all that down below so you guys can jump around if you want to. So my Super Bowl winner for this year is your Detroit Lions. They are 12-1 to win the Super Bowl, plus 1,200. I actually took them this morning. I bet on it this morning. You can go see that bet on Pickett. If you are someone that bets throughout the NFL season, if you use Underdog Fantasy, if you use FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, whoever, if you use multiple sports books and you want to sync them and be able to track them and see your record and your history and how much units you're up or down over time, Pickett. I forgot I'm wearing their hat. Pickett is the GOAT, okay? They're an app. They're free to download. You could use the link right down below, and they'll get you started. You can also use that link, and it'll auto-follow my account. So you could see all the bets that I put down, but you'll see I took the Detroit Lions at plus 1,200 today. Their biggest contender in the NFC is San Francisco probably, and they seem to be in a bit of disarray. 5 of the top 8 Super Bowl favorites right now per Vegas are in the AFC, so you can kind of let them cannibalize each other. I just don't see a ton of holes in this team at all, and they heavily upgraded their defense. You talk about bringing in DJ Reader. Their secondary was obviously their weak point. They get Brian Branch back, but they drafted Terran Arnold in the first, Ennis Rakestraw in the second. They brought in Carlton Davis. Now, it might take a second to mesh a little bit, but their pass defense is going to be exponentially improved. And when you bring in DJ Reader and put him next to Alan McNeil, you have 2 top 10 run defenders. Those are both top 10 graded run defender interior linemen, 2 attached to Aiden Hutchinson. So they just have the blueprint to be a Super Bowl winning team in the modern day NFL. You've got a leader of men at head coach in Dan Campbell that knows his fucking role. You have a brilliant offensive mind at offense coordinator who's going to leave them for a head coaching job in a year in Ben Johnson. You have a cornerstone pass rusher in Aiden Hutchinson, who's a double-digit sack guy. You have a veteran quarterback, a guy like Jared Goff, who gets smarter and better as he gets older. You have elite weaponry in Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. You have the number 1 offensive line in the NFL. Their biggest hole in offense is the wide receiver position. If Jameson Williams can come in and be good, it doesn't even need to be great. If he could be good, that's going to spread the offense out so much. I wish they hung on to Josh Reynolds. He was such a good complementary piece to do the dirty work here. But they did pick up Tim Patrick, so we'll see how that goes. But if Williams pops, man, I just think that spreads that defense out so much and makes them kind of unstoppable. So absolutely love the Detroit Lions this year as my pick, 12-1. MVP, I'm not really going to overthink this. I think you could make the argument that Jared Goff is a great value pick based on what I just said, and they play 15 of their first 16 games indoors. So there's just not a lot that can go wrong with that team. I took the boring pick, Patrick Mahomes, plus 500, so 5-1. Rookie of the year, I stayed boring. Caleb Williams at plus 150, so not a ton of value there. Head coach of the year, I don't hate Jonathan Gannon at plus 1,600, but they have a pretty tough schedule, so why not just dip back into Detroit? Dan Campbell is plus 2,000. He is 20-1 odds. He was 7th in the voting 2 years ago. He was 3rd last year. I think this is where it comes together for Dan Campbell. I don't understand those odds, to be honest with you. This is one of those things where it's weird to predict. They use different barometers, and bad teams are better to have head coaches for this than good teams, and you can't really predict adversity a lot of times. The coach who wins it is it has a quarterback that goes down and then fights through that kind of shit. So it's very hard to predict these things, obviously, but I just feel finished 3rd last year and he's 20-1 odds to win it this year with an even better team. It's fucking value. That's value. Offensive player of the year. Yeah, we're going to take A.J. Brown. As I said, that pace was insane. He is plus 4,000. So you're talking about 40-1 odds. 40-1 odds? FanDuel has him all the way at 18-1. So there are other books that are 40-1, and if you can get that type of value, that's fucking insane. Defensive player of the year, we're going to go Max Crosby here. I just think that dude is different. I think he's a fucking animal. And you bring in Christian Wilkins to the defensive line. This is going to be that's the only downside with Max Crosby is his offense is going to give him no real breaks. But he's got a motor like a F1 Ferrari. He don't stop, man. When you watch him play, he's just a different type of beast. Same animal, different beast. So Max Crosby is my defensive player of the year pick. Comeback player of the year. This one's really tough to bet against Aaron Rodgers. He's 2-1 odds. He's plus 200 right now. My alternate pick would probably be Kyler because he's at 25-1. There's a world where I think the Jets underperform a little bit, go 9-8. The Cards overperform a little bit, go 8-9 or 9-8. You definitely need some bad luck for them. You need some good luck for the Cardinals. I think the hardest thing to overcome here is the narrative and the media that's being pushed in favor of Rodgers because of how hyped the story was last year and how devastating the injury was. It'll be all eyes on Rodgers that if he plays up to top 12-ish quarterback level, he's probably winning this. the media push will probably be a little bit too strong for him. But it's why I like Kyler, because you're getting him at like 12x the odds there, right? Aaron Rodgers is 2-1. Kyler's 25-1. So if I'm looking for a little value sprinkle, go grab Kyler. I also put some money down on some other plays for week 1 and some like rookie touchdown leaders and rushing touchdown leaders again. And you can, again, track all those on Pickett if you follow my account. So we'll move to the last part of this video as promised. We'll look back at last year's video. I'll link that down below if you just want to go watch it, and I'll run through these quickly. My first prediction were that 3 rookie tight ends would finish top 20 in fantasy, which was kind of, I mean, that was definitely a bold take at the time because you never have good rookie tight ends in fantasy. And in particular, I predicted Kincaid, Laporta, and Musgrave. So we nailed Laporta, Kincaid. Technically, this hit if we just stuck with the top 20 part. Ironically, Tucker Kraft actually snuck in on a points per game basis. He was the tight end 20 last year. So wasn't Luke, but it was Tucker Kraft. Hit it. Bold prediction number 2. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin both go over 1,000 yards. No one wanted a piece of this offense. They were looking at Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay the same way that they looked at like Geno and Metcalf and Lockett the year before. They all fell. No one wanted them. They all provided a shitload of value. Same thing happened. So we nailed that one out of the park. Both Godwin and Mike Evans went over 1,000 yards. Number 3, Michael Wilson will be a top 3 rookie fantasy wide receiver. He didn't get there. But I will say, if you do watch the video, or maybe Tony will put the clip up, at the beginning of the video, Brett Coleman came in and we made a little side bet there where he was hyping up Quentin Johnston.
Just recording a video. It's my bold predictions for the year. No context.
Everything that I have heard from the Chargers about Quentin Johnston is that he's legit.
I'm sorry, Brett. I don't know what you were doing there. But I said that Michael Wilson's going to outscore Quentin Johnston, and I think I could have got that at like 15-1 odds at the time, and that would hit because Michael Wilson outscored Quentin Johnston. So we'll move on to number 4. And that was that Green Bay will have a top 12 fantasy scorer at each position. Jordan Love got there. I still believe Aaron Jones would have got there because he was insane in week 1. He was the RB1 overall. Then he had a high ankle sprain. And then the last 5 weeks of the season, he went nuclear, but he missed a ton of time, so there was no way he was getting into the top 12. But I think had he not got hurt, he would have got there. Jaden Reed only got up to wide receiver 23, and then, Musgrave got hurt, so those two were kind of sharing it. So it was a tough one. I feel like the idea was right. Like I was kind of just buying in on the upside of Green Bay's offense, and it hit, but too many moving parts going on over there. Bold prediction number 5 last year was that Tyreek, Tua, and Jalen Waddle all finished top 5. Another one that didn't quite come together all the way, but I think the idea and the theory was kind of spot on. Tyreek Hill was obviously a game changer. Tua led the NFL in passing yards, and then Waddle was kind of injury-riddled throughout the year. The next 2 were kind of abysmal. Let's just say that I said a lot of positive things about Dameon Pierce and Deshaun Watson, and then we could just all respectfully and friendly, because you guys really like me, we can move to number 8. Yeah, the last one was that Brock Purdy would be the highest scoring fantasy quarterback in the NFC West. That came to fruition pretty easily and wasn't like super bold, but I guess it kind of was. This was his ADP at the time of drafting starting, or the season starting. So he was actually the second one off the board there. Geno Smith was a lot higher than him. Kyler Murray and Matt Stafford were right behind him. And I actually pivoted mid-take to saying that he'd be the highest scoring fantasy player in the entire NFC West, which technically didn't hit because C-Max outscored him. But Purdy did finish as the QB6 overall in fantasy football. So overall, I think the bold predictions were spicy enough, and I hit on a decent amount of them, and at least I was pushing in the right direction for a lot of them. All right, so there you have it. I felt like I had to get on paper some of my predictions for the upcoming year. As always, it's Michael Wilson's season, and when he breaks the fuck out everywhere, I want all the credit. I love you guys. Make sure you go check out Underdog Fantasy, promo code BDGE to get that Travis Kelce free square. Deposit $10 and it'll magically appear.